Finally, they called and they said, all right, well, what do I have to do? And my answer was, you have to get my attention, and you don't have it yet. The following day, I got a phone call, and he says, okay, will this number get your attention? And it did. I pulled over and I stopped, and we had a conversation there on what it was going to take.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And Icon Realty Group, helping home buyers, sellers, and investors in the West Michigan area. Find out more at theiconrealtygroup.com.
Have you ever owned or lived in a haunted house? Have you or your tenants ever encountered unexplained phenomena? If you have any real-life ghost stories, we'd love to hear them. The best will be compiled for a very special Halloween episode. Nothing is too scary or off limits. As long as it happened to you or someone you know, we want to hear about it. Email me at brian@higinvestor.com by Friday, October 6th to share your story.
Hello and welcome to episode 88. My guest today is Brian Durham, a real estate agent and office manager for Precision Real Estate. He's also finished law school, and he'll be taking the bar in February. And we're going to talk today about some of the details that you need to pay attention to when it comes to real estate investing. Brian's going to give us his perspective. He's been in this game for quite a while and has some pretty high-level ideas that he'd like to share with us today. Brian, thanks for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Brian. I appreciate being here.
Why don't you fill in the details and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Great. Yeah. Well, real estate's always been something that I've been interested in. I got my license back in 2003, passively held it until 2009 when I really started doing it more actively. One of the reasons I got into real estate back in 2003, we had bought our second home. I was into telecommunications at the time, so traveling was a big part of my job. So my only criteria was that we had to be close to the highway. My wife went on the search with the realtor, and we looked around. She had found something. She gave me a call and said that we have to have it. And you know, when your wife says you have to have it, you just have to have it. So
nothing else will do.
Exactly. So I went and I took a look at it, and it was in Rockford. It was a 2.5 acre piece with a nice ranch style walkout basement. It's a great house.
That's Rockford, Michigan.
Rockford, Michigan. Yeah. At the time it was $150,000, which to me was a fortune. I didn't know how I was going to pull this one off. The house that we were currently in, I paid $65,000 for and was managing, but it was, it was a little duplex on the west side. So when we looked at it and we started looking at how we were going to pull this off, how we were going to pay for it, I actually had to cash in stocks and pretty much liquidate everything I had to come up with a down payment. Had to get a non-conventional mortgage because I didn't have the best credit yet, even though I had a house. I still was growing in my career. I was making $12 an hour, but we were able to pull it off. I got into it. I was there for about 6 months. And actually probably a little bit less when I realized that there was potential there for something bigger than just a primary residence, which is what I was there. We saw some articles in the paper. Grand Rapids Press actually put an article that said that corner between 131 and 10 Mile, Home Depot was possibly looking at it to build. So that was my first.
Right by your house?
That was actually adjacent to my property line.
Oh, okay. So that's an interesting sign there.
Right. It was a big indicator that, okay, this could be a little bit more than what I had thought. So then about, I think it was so I was a year and a half into it before I got my first, somebody approached me first. And there was somebody that I thought was this Home Depot thing maybe was going to start. They offered me fair market value, and I said, I don't think so. We've worked too hard to keep what we have right now, and it's, it was tough to make those mortgage payments at that time because
you were struggling to pay the bills, right?
Right. So it was, so I figured I'd worked that hard. I was going to hang on to it, and they're going to have to make me leave, and that went a dollar figure. So then it went a little bit longer, and all of a sudden the phone calls started coming a little bit more frequently. Every couple of weeks they'd call and talk to me about...
Same person?
It was the same. The first one was somebody else, but the second one, it was the same person. And then they kept calling back. And every time they called, the number would get a little bigger, a little bigger. And then finally they called and they said, all right, well, what do I have to do? And my answer was, you have to get my attention, and you don't have it yet. The following day, I got a phone call, and he says, okay, will this number get your attention? And it did. I pulled over and I stopped, and we had a conversation there on what it was going to take. My only delay at that point was that I told him that I couldn't close until I had a solid 2 years in the property. And that was something that I don't even know why I knew the information, but I had read someplace that there was a capital gains exemption if you lived in a primary residence for 2 of the previous 5 years.
So you would not have to pay capital gains
Exactly.
on a profit up to $500,000.
Exactly, or 250 single, 500 joint.
Right. So
Right.
with your wife, you could make
Exactly.
at least a $500, or you could make a $500,000 profit and not pay
exactly.
tax on that.
So, and that was, again, it was almost dumb luck that I knew that, and it was almost dumb luck that everything came together. It was a little bit of paying attention to different things. When I found out that that was a potential for an investment property, I did start looking a little bit into what that meant, and those are some of the things that popped up. So I kind of give myself a little bit of credit. That was a smart move, but it was a lot of luck too.
So you made a good profit,
Yeah.
and you moved out, and what did they do to your house?
I plowed it down and put up a mire.
A Meijer. So for those who don't know what Meijer is, it's basically a nicer Walmart,
Right. Yeah.
which is very big here in Michigan.
Yeah.
We love our Meijer.
Oh, we sure do. Born in Greenville, Michigan, and it's expanded, and it's on every street corner, and it seems like in Michigan, and parts of Indiana. But yeah, that was my first experience in real estate myself, and other than, like I said, the first house that we bought there, which turned into being a rental, that was my first duplex that I owned.
So you kept the duplex that you and your wife had been living in.
Correct.
When you went to your wife and you said, honey, they want to give us this much money,
Right.
was she reluctant to move, or was she swayed by the offer that you received?
Well, yeah, she was definitely swayed. However, it wasn't as easy of a sell as I thought it would be. Because I had the number in my head a long time ago, and I figured, you know what, if they hit this, then we're good. But going back and discussing it with my wife, it was like, well, what is she going to get out of it? Wait a minute, this is a perfect home. And it was, to this day, we look back and we loved that house, loved where it sat, loved how it sat. It was phenomenal. But they were going to build around us whether we were there or not.
Do you sometimes go to the Meijer and just sit there in the middle?
Oh yeah. Every time we pull in there, we look at the parking lot
room.
going, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're in my living room.
But yeah, we made a few purchases afterwards. And that was my, like I said, that's what really spurred my passion into real estate. So immediately after that deal closed, I went out and I got my real estate license, took the class and started studying about what it meant to be a realtor. And from there, I just always watched it, and we bought a couple properties for investments, a couple duplexes and a single family. And then, I kind of thought that was going to be the only way I was going to use my realtor license, was doing my own investing. But as I dealt with other people through the years, and once I met Aaron, I started realizing that the connections with the people was really almost as satisfying as the deals you do. Because there's so many.
In what way?
Well, I helped one family that they didn't think they could get a house. So once you start walking them through the process, you start introducing them to the mortgage companies. And mortgage companies are great because once you introduce somebody that has a credit issue or can't get a mortgage, they immediately go to work to start talking to them about what they have to do to get there. Because they want the sale as much as anybody else. But now you've got people that had no hope for getting a house to all of a sudden they've got a roadmap.
They've got a plan.
Right.
They can follow.
And they know what direction to go. And that's really cool. To get somebody into their first home has been a neat feeling. It's rewarding. Mm-hmm. And then there's the investors. I have some people that they call you and they want to get into real estate because they know that that's fast money. It's a way to actually build equity and build a substantial foundation. And to get them on a road that's you can learn a lot. And I know that you've mentioned the Kiyosaki books before, and Love Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a great series. But even with that, you still need that team behind you to get it going. And it's nice. It's neat to have some investors come in and start seeing that same roadmap to where they have to go and how to get there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that team, because you're one of those the components of a team.
Sure.
As a realtor, but you're also getting a law degree, or you have a law degree, and you'll be hopefully passing. Explain the bar situation. You're going to take the bar in February, but you already took it in July,
right?
But you don't have the results from it until October or November. So you may have passed the bar,
right? And then I won't have to take it in February,
or you may be taking it again in February.
So I'm always a pessimist, always saying, okay, if I didn't make it, then I'm just going to start preparing now, so that February is the only time. And the bar is an interesting thing. It's a pretty tough test. It's a 2-day test. It has a low passage rate, mostly. My alma mater in town here, I went to Cooley, and they did a fantastic job preparing and getting us ready to pass this test. So when I say I got to take it in February, that's my pessimistic way of saying that I'm just going to be that ready.
So why become an attorney? Or why go through the legal way? Because you have a telecom background that we haven't really talked about too much, but you have the real estate background, both of which you've been very successful in. Now you've decided to go the legal route. How do those three things kind of intersect?
Well, yeah, and that's my mission, is to make sure that they intersect, and that's what I'm going to do here on out. Everything is a contract, which is obviously law. I mean, you do real estate, that's all contracts. Telecommunications, it's a lot of contracts and a lot of dealing with the big companies. And so I would like to tie it together in that way with the contracts as well. But then there's also the property law itself. With every property, there's so many different inroads, so many different details to look at. With every lease, there's going to be covenants, and there's going to be different agreements in there and what you can and can't do. People that get into purchases, they have to know what's in the deed and what you can and can't do with that property.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because this is one of those issues when it comes to real estate that a lot of people either think they know what they're doing and looking at when they read a deed, or look at the title work. Maybe they think they can do it themselves. Maybe they have an attorney and they just say, here, you look at it, tell me if there's something I need to know. What are some of the particulars when it comes to the deed and the title work when you're buying or selling a property that you need to pay attention to?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so you definitely want to look through, and you want to see if there's any encumbrances on your property. I mean, you need to know if there's easements.
What is an encumbrance?
Okay, so an encumbrance is anybody or anything that holds an interest into that property besides the owner. So if you have, there could be a utility easement. There could be your neighbor has, you've given him an easement to get to the lake that's on the other side of your property.
So an easement would be like a right of access or right of way.
Sure.
Or utility easement would be maybe the Comcast cable has lines going under your front yard or something.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And of course the government has theirs as well. Generally it's a lot of times they have an easement that's from the center line. It can go anywhere from 15 to 30 feet from the center line into your property that they can run some utilities and things in. And it depends on where you live and the traffic on your road and things like that. I always recommend a title insurance company. I just think that it's imperative to make sure that you're protecting yourself, and that's where that insurance would come from. They check to make sure that that's free and clear for you to purchase, and that you get the entire deed.
And what are they checking? Are they just looking at the city records or the county records and saying, okay, well, these easements or encumbrances have been recorded?
Exactly, and that's all
these you need to be aware of these.
Exactly, mm-hmm. And that's all they can check is the ones that are recorded. The ones that are not recorded are the ones that you're going to want. That if they come up later, that's where it's going to be important to have an agent or a licensed lawyer take a look at the ones that pop up when nobody knew about, because the insurance agent only insures about what's been recorded. So, they're going to
title insurance agent.
Title insurance, mm-hmm. Yeah, excuse me, yeah.
So, do you have any examples in your experience of title issues dealing with encumbrances or whatever that have created problems in the deals that you've done?
Yeah, I did. I've had one that was, it was just a vacant piece of property. The husband had died and the wife was trying to sell it after the fact. And it was just we chased down this title for 6-8 months back and forth trying to figure out when it was recorded and what was recorded and how many times it transferred and to who it transferred to. So the gentleman before he passed had sold it to a developer, and he had sold it on a land contract. The developer went into default. It was in the boom of the 2000s there. And then he had regained that property back. But then prior to that, he had actually given it to his son through a quitclaim deed, but it had conditions on it that if his son didn't want to use it, then it would go back to him and then he could sell it. So it was what they call a ladybird deed, where it's yours if you do this with it, but if you don't, then I get it back and I can do whatever I want with it. And if you do take it, then you can't do this, this, or this. So I mean, it was this intertwined mess of covenants and things that you could or could not do with it.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, we had to show where it basically was void because he never used it in that way. So therefore, the husband that passed could do what he wanted to do and sell it. And then when he had passed, we had to show where the trust had actually given it to the wife so that she could sell it. So, I mean, it was
very tangled.
Yeah, I have a Bible of this title search that we went through, 2,000 pages of.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. I'd also like to tell you about Joshua Schaub and his team at Icon Realty Group, a full-service real estate company in the West Michigan area. Joshua has been a guest on this show several times, and he and his team at Icon Realty Group help buyers gain an edge in this competitive market. They assist sellers in getting the best price and terms for their properties, and they work with investors to understand the numbers, neighborhoods, and market forces that will set them up for long-term success. To learn more and get a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Joshua at 616-216-2000 or visit theiconrealtygroup.com. So as an investor, when you run into those deals, it's called hair on the deal.
Right.
But if you can find those deals, sometimes you can get them at a really good price, but you have to go through unraveling and untangling those kinds of details.
Oh, exactly. And we were fortunate in this particular instance that the buyer was patient. Because I think we did 7 or 8 addendums to extend this before it was done. And they were just in a position where they could wait, so everything was good.
Now, as the realtor, were you the one doing all the untangling, or were there attorneys involved who were?
There was attorneys involved. I can't say enough about our title agent. If you don't mind me putting in a plug, it's
name names here.
Essential Title. Deanna out there, she just did a fantastic job running through this. And then everything she needed, she'd give me a call, and I ran to the township to get her the paperwork she needed, and we went back and forth with it in kind of team effort. And at the end, the funny thing was that one of the bankers actually found the ladybird deed. So it was part of the team. And everything that they found, we'd run down, and that's where it just built up. And,
so that's got to get kind of your legal juices flowing there.
I guess so. Oh yeah,
you're really dealing with the law and how those things work. What other examples can you give us about some of the legal details?
One of the ones that I had come up was an eviction, which was interesting. One of my properties. It was, as I wrote up the lease for it, I was talking to my lawyer at the time, and he had mentioned that drug use, because drug use is such a big thing. In your lease, you can actually put in there if your tenants have been found to be using drugs on the property, it's almost an immediate eviction. It's faster than some of the other evictions you can do. And I think that a lot of that had to do with the marijuana, legalization of marijuana and the growing and everything else. But that was an interesting clause that I've seen put in leases that I didn't know about before.
Yeah. So you can put it in your lease, hey, if you're using illegal drugs,
Right.
including marijuana.
As long as it's illegal, yeah. So I mean, if they hold a card, then I think that's going to be an interesting. So that's one of the ones that before it was illegal, they put it in there as a clause, and now that it's legal, I think it's going to be an interesting.
It's a little bit of a gray area.
Yeah.
I think there was a bill that passed or that's making its way that deals specifically with that in Michigan.
Oh, yeah, there's going to have to be. If it isn't already, I'm sure that there's one working on it because it's such a big thing right now.
Yeah, and the RPOA is actually involved in pushing that through.
Fantastic.
To make sure that landlords have the ability to not allow people to smoke marijuana or grow marijuana in their properties.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's talk about title work a little bit more. What other things in the title work should we be paying attention to?
As an agent, when I go and I start doing my disclosures on a property and I start talking to somebody, one of the questions that I'll ask a lot of my clients is, does anybody else use this property with or without your permission? I mean, is there a trail out back that your neighbor uses to get to the pond or get to his other neighbors? Because that will come up, and after a certain amount of time, if they've been using it, and if with or without permission, if they've been using it, there's a thing called adverse possession. It happens more so on lakefront properties and things where somebody that
adverse possession. Let's talk about that.
It's an interesting concept. It's one that I didn't think would be as predominant as it is, or as it wouldn't happen as often as it does. So adverse possession it's a hostile taking of a property. So basically, your neighbor knows that he's using your property, but he calls it his, holds it out to everybody else that it is his property, and then he puts out maybe a fence or something to where he exclusively possesses that piece of property. After the statute of limitations expires, and I think it's 15 years in Michigan. You'd probably have to check with the licensed attorney for that. But I say that because I'm not a licensed attorney and I don't give legal advice. But
soon you will be.
Soon I will be, absolutely. And then by all means, call me.
But in the meantime,
check with the attorneys to make sure that we're, So after a certain period of time, they can actually file quiet title to it and put their name on that piece of property after the statute of limitations has passed. And then it's a legal battle if you want to get it back. And a lot of times you won't. I haven't personally come across it because any interruption in that possession stops it and starts the statute of limitations over again. So I've known people that their neighbor was doing that with a piece of property. So they sent him a letter and said, I know you're on my property and I know that you're using it for this. I give you permission to do that. Well, once you interrupt their exclusive possession of that property, then it starts the statute of limitations all over again.
So if you own property and you know your neighbor's fence is a yard into your property,
right? You
can send them a letter. And do you have to file that with the city, to start that chain?
Well, I'm going to give you a typical a legal response to that, and that would be it depends. So it really does. It depends on how long they've used it. It depends on when that permission was given. It depends on the uniqueness of the use. And it can even come down to sometimes depending on the expense of changing it. So if they had a fence there for 5 years and it would cost the value of the property is $1,000, it would cost them $12,000 to remove it. The courts may side with the value's not worth it to remove it and replace it, even though it's not yours.
One of the things I wanted to talk about is cell towers.
Okay.
That's something we haven't talked about on this show before, and it's something I have a little bit of knowledge and experience about with one of my own properties. But can you talk about, and you also have a telecommunications background, by the way.
I do.
So tell us about cell towers and their potential to bring in extra rent.
Oh, sure. In site acquisition in cell towers is huge, and I could bring some more experienced people in to speak directly to that have actually done the leasing. I haven't done the leasing, but I've dealt with a lot of landowners that have towers on their property. We've had to get access through my company in doing some of the work that we do, but it's an abundant. Obviously, there's a lot of towers out there. There's a lot of land that's leased for towers. You've got some big companies out there that own the majority of the land leases. And then you've got some smaller ones that are still getting into it. And even today, they're still buying.
And the cell towers, by the way, we're talking about those big, tall towers that usually have like cell equipment or
yes.
radio equipment or whatever up there for like T-Mobile or AT&T or whoever's doing the cell.
Oh, absolutely. Right? And we can get into there's so much different equipment, and it depends on what kind of, so they call them platforms, and for each platform there's antennas and there's different equipment on each one of them, and then each one is owned by a different user. So AT&T might have one platform on an antenna, and the next platform might be owned by Sprint, and the next one might be owned by Verizon, and then there might, even though they're all on the same tower, they could be in the same compound, so to speak.
So, and then someone owns the tower. It's not necessarily the landowner. So How does that break down? Because if I own the land, I would provide what's called a land lease.
Right.
To lease the space for them to build the tower on.
Right.
I don't own the tower.
No.
So a different company owns the tower.
Correct.
And then that company leases out space on that tower to other companies.
Right.
To put their equipment.
Yeah. And I haven't, like I said, I haven't actually seen these leases, but from talking to the landowners and talking to some of the companies that I've worked for, I understand that they do work differently, and it almost depends on who you're dealing with and how it's going to work. Some companies will actually pay you per carrier. Some people will just pay you for the flat out, this is how much land we want, and we want access to it, and this is what we charge. But it's a separate interest in that property. And a lot of times, and I think that we mentioned before the show, you talked about where there's cases to where people will sell the land around that cell tower and hold on to that lease. So, and I've run into it a lot, and it actually makes some of the owners a little disgruntled, because when we have to get to this lease, they're like, well, I don't make any money on that. You drive across my property right now, but the guy that sold me the property kept that lease, and so I'm not making a dime, and we're running all this traffic through his property now. And it can be a little bit hairy sometimes, and especially when you have to make a change.
If you own the land and you lease the land for the cell tower,
right,
but then you sell the land, you can still keep that lease.
Right.
That's a separate component now, right?
Yeah. So they maintain that interest on the lease, or they sell it outright to the company sometime. So
the company that put the cell tower there in the first place.
Right. So, and then they could actually take a net on that in just a one-time payment, and then they leave, and then basically it deeds that property to them with a life lease on the access to it. And then the person that's buying the property around it thinks that they're going to get, and they don't. And again, that comes back to the details. When you're looking at your deed, if you're going to buy a piece of property that has a cell tower on it, you should probably look and see, well, where is the lease to that cell tower, and am I getting that with the property?
Yeah. And that lease, by the way, can be quite lucrative.
Oh, sure.
I mean, because those cell towers bring in a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. And again, I haven't seen the leases, so I don't know the actual numbers, but I've heard they are quite high, and it could be a nice way to supplement.
Well, I'll give you an example, a real world example from my experience. I'm one of the owners of a building in downtown Grand Rapids, and when we bought it, we did not get the roof rights. At least the roof rights as they pertain to cell towers or cellular equipment. Someone else had purchased the roof rights from the previous owner years before we ever came into the picture.
Right.
So, but there was one T-Mobile antenna on the roof that was sort of grandfathered in. It had been there before that the roof rights had been purchased. So
Right.
The previous owner and we were going to continue receiving about $1,400 a month. If I recall correctly, about $1,400 a month, just from allowing them to put T-Mobile to put their antenna up on the roof. Just before we closed, T-Mobile sent notice to the current owners, which were the ones we bought the property from, that they were going to cancel that contract within about 9 months.
Okay.
And we had to go and look at the value of the property because we had, if you use a cap rate of 7 or 8, which we were using on that property, and you take that $1,400 a month that they were bringing in, it's about $150,000 to $250,000 in value.
Sure.
That was being taken away from the property because that cell tower or that T-Mobile cellular equipment on the roof was going away. That shows you how lucrative it can be and the value that it can add to your property. And, the sadness we went through when we lost that income. And let's talk about this. As the owners of this building, we can't necessarily go out to other cell operators and say, hey, put your antenna on our roof. We'll charge you $1,400 a month and you can put your antenna. They come to you.
Right.
Is what you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
No,
this
you're
is
absolutely
what I've
right.
heard. They come to you. So how does that work? I mean, from the telecommunications side.
Yeah, and that is an interesting reason because people think, well, I got this open space, you should just come here. Well, they're not going to go there unless it's lucrative for them, of course. And the reason it would be lucrative is it would go by population. How many people are they going to serve? What's their closest tower already? And are they going to pick up enough traffic to pay that rent plus make a profit? So a lot of it goes by demographics. They're going to stop and they're going to look and see who lives around that, how big the population is it a population that uses their service, and how fast can they recoup their money? Because to put up a tower or to put up anything, even on a rooftop, is hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on what they're putting up there. And actually, I have a friend that's a construction manager that could probably give you dollar for dollar exactly what it costs to put one up. But it's not cheap, and they want to know how fast they can get that back. And most times, they're talking about a matter of months when they want to recoup their investment that quick. And telecom is notoriously, it's a quick recap of their money. Even though they're putting money out left and right, they're getting it back fast or faster. Mm-hmm. So that is one of the things. And last week it's interesting to me because everything ties together. It's funny because a lot of our subjects always will come back together. Last week you mentioned mineral rights in your show, and it's kind of similar to the difference rights in property and title, and again, it ties together. Roof rights, mineral rights, looking for the easements and encroachments and your title. It's all those details that you want to make sure that you get.
Yeah, there are many aspects to buying property,
right?
And it's not always the building that's on the property. There's other things there. But I think you and I would both agree, if you own property that's suitable for a cell tower, whether it be with the roof rights or with a cell tower on farmland or whatever, it's best not to negotiate that yourself.
Oh yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. You definitely want to have somebody that you want to have a licensed attorney that's in that field look at it.
Knows that field well.
Because there's so many. The contracts it's not like a purchase agreement where it's a 2-3 page document that you can read through and kind of understand. And if you don't understand, it's a couple words you look up. It's not. But you're talking about a contract that could be 40, 50 pages long that is constant legal jargon. And it's, there's so many different issues that you want to make sure you can spot on there.
And let's talk about contracts because,
sure.
I'm always of the mind that he who writes the contract is probably going to come out ahead because you're writing the contract in favor of your position, what you want.
Right.
And this applies to cell tower. So if someone wants to put a cell tower on your land and they write the contract and say, here, let's work off of this. Well, obviously that contract is going to be biased toward their needs.
It is. Courts will look at that though. And that's one of the things that they do teach us in school, in law school, about contracts, is that the person that writes the contract, that's who the judge will hold most stringent to. They'll hold it against him harder than they will to the person that didn't write it.
So if they try to sneak something in there.
Right.
Okay.
And remember, a contract is a meeting of the minds. It's supposed to be two people that got together, that they came together with an agreement. They both understand what they're doing, and they simply put it in the form of writing. And then it's supposed to just be an interpretation of what you both agreed to again. So if somebody's trying to sneak something in there, it should be able to be argued if it's not what was intended.
If you get to
if it goes to that
the court
point,
phase.
Right.
But it's better to have an attorney on your team
always
experienced in that type of whatever the matter is, whether
Absolutely.
it be cell towers or just real estate law, to look at it and nip it in the bud before it ever becomes an issue.
I couldn't agree more. I believe in an expert on everything we do. I mean, if you are looking at being an investor, then you should talk to some experts that are investors. If you're buying real estate, you should talk to a realtor that's an expert in that field, and legal and everything else, taxes. I mean, you talk to the people that do it in and out every day, and you're going to get the best advice. You can do it yourself, but depending on where you're at, how much are you really risking? I mean, sometimes I'd rather pay $1,000 for somebody to look at something as opposed to lose $10,000 because I made a mistake myself.
Yeah, I just did a deal, or I should say I didn't do a deal, but I ended up spending about $1,000 on legal advice. It was an auction property.
Okay.
And there you have to do all your due diligence before you bid.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we spent $1,000 on a property that we got way outbid on. But I'm glad we did it, because had we gotten that property, it was very important to understand.
Oh, absolutely. I had a client that just a month ago, we were going to buy a piece of property for development. He wanted to put, I think he wanted to put 30 houses on this property, and it was set up. It was perfect. Everything perked. It was going to be really reasonable to run in the road and have it ready to go. And then through his due diligence, he found out that water and sewer were 1,800 feet away through a commercial property that we would have had to get an easement, and it was going to end up costing him way more than he would ever profited. And he was able to get out of the deal. But that,
wow.
And again, that cost him a little over $1,000 to find that information out, but it saved him so much
Millions.
more. Yeah. Actually, it was 1.5 was what it was going to cost him to develop it after the fact.
Wow.
And that was not what he was expecting.
One of the other types of contracts that you've done is a land contract. You actually sold one of your properties on a land contract, and there's a story there that I'm wondering if you'll share with us.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. It was a single family home, and I did sell it on land contract. It was some people, they were looking at getting a little bigger house than what they had. This was a perfect fit for us. We were moving at the time, and so it was our home, and we went ahead and sold it to them on a land contract, because otherwise I was going to rent it out, and this was kind of a good fit all the way around. So I had an attorney write up the land contract. We put in there that I would be a secondary on the insurance, so that the insurance company would not only insure our residents, but they would also include me on any billing. So I would know if they didn't pay or where it stood, so that it just kind of kept me abreast of the
So is that
property.
a smart thing to do, is to make sure that if you're selling on a land contract, that the people who are buying it from you maintain insurance?
Absolutely. You want to protect your investment, and that's, you want to protect yourself as well.
And you did that by putting your name, by putting yourself as the secondary insured, or is that the term?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So it would probably be more like a third, because the mortgage company, of course, would be your primary insured, and then the people that owned it, and then you would be on a third. And I did that because I wanted to make sure that I still had some interest in the property, because we did do a quit claim. So I allowed them to register the land contract. They were able to register the home in their name so that they could put it as their principal residence and get the lower tax. Instead of an investment property, it's now their residence, 100% homestead.
Okay.
So it worked out well all the way around there. Unfortunately, about a year into it, I got a phone call that the insurance wasn't being paid. So I of course, I made the payment because I wanted the property to be insured. So I made sure that stayed insured. And shortly thereafter, the house actually caught fire and burnt to the ground. Insurance company got involved at that point, and they started investigating, and they were not going to pay out on the property because they decided it was an intentional burn.
So someone had intentionally burned it down, is what the insurance company was
That's
saying.
What they were saying.
Not you,
yeah.
of course.
No, actually, they
someone else.
But they did call me in to talk to me about it because that's part of the procedure. And the insurance company decided that they were not paying for the property. So after a year investigation, and of course, this whole time I continued to make the mortgage payment and my land contract, the tenants stopped making the payment. At which point I had to foreclose on them to take the property back, even though there was nothing on it other than vacant property. After a year, or give or take, the mortgage or the insurance company decided they did pay off the mortgage and left me with the property, but they wouldn't pay anything above and beyond, which rightfully so if it was indeed intentional. So it was important to have all that paperwork and have it protected. But it still left the other issue is that they were registered on the deed. So they technically still owned that property until I could get a quitclaim back from them.
Through the foreclosure process?
Well, you could either go foreclosure or you could offer them a deal, which is what I did. Is I sent them a release and satisfaction, basically saying that I wouldn't sue them for any more money. We wouldn't go after any other issues if they just signed the quitclaim deed to give me interest back, which is what they did, and that's as far as it went.
So had your name not been on the insurance policy, would you have received any money from the insurance company?
Not likely. I mean, it would have been a bigger battle, I think. And I'm sure that the right lawyers in the right spots probably could have helped me, but I don't think it would have been as cut and dry. At this particular point, and the way I had it set up was that it was obvious that I was basically the other, and plus I was making those payments to the mortgage company, so they treated me as a mortgage basically, and they paid off the debt.
So you also do some charity work that revolves around real estate and tenant law. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, sure, absolutely. And it's hit or miss, and when we can get down there, but twice a month they do a tenant law program at the Urban League in Grand Rapids.
Tenant law?
It's tenant law, yeah. Mm-hmm. So what they do is that they allow, it's a free service for the community, and then tenants particularly, will come in and they'll discuss their issues either with their landlords or with their lease and things that they don't understand or things that are happening. And so through college and through law school, I would go down there and I would volunteer my time, and we'd look over the law and what they can and can't do and what their rights are as tenants. As a landlord in the past, it's something that I think that we have a responsibility to know, not only our landlord rights, but our rights of our tenants, and make sure that we're adhering to them. One of the big common ones is their deposit. When people leave or they move out, sometimes landlords think that they can keep that deposit, and of course that's not true. You got to give your deposit back. And what a lot of people don't know is that as tenants, when you leave, you need to leave a forwarding address, and you have to make sure that your landlord has it within 4 days. And then
otherwise, how can they return your deposit?
Exactly. And then the landlord only has, I think, 7 days to return their deposit. Otherwise, they could be fined as well. So, I mean,
but as a landlord, if the tenant leaves a property in a damaged condition or worse condition than when they moved in,
right?
What is, looking at that from the other side of the landlord's side, what do they need to provide to show, hey, this is why you're not getting your full deposit back?
Well, and that's exactly right. Exactly what you said. They need to provide a statement that says, this is what it cost me to fix what you did, and this is why your deposit's not going to, and they need to do that immediately. I mean, they need to get that back almost as quickly as the address, I think it's within 7 days, but it has to be, that response is what saves them from getting penalized for not returning their deposit. So at least there is a paper trail at that point. If they go to court, they can say, yes, I didn't give it back to them, but this is why, and this is what they received. So, I mean, they might still argue about it, but at least there's a paper trail, and that's what the court needs to see.
What in working with tenant law and the Urban League,
Yeah.
and working with the Urban League, what are some of the things that you see landlords doing that you would like to see them do better?
Oh, maintaining property is huge. That term in which, being a landlord myself, I always hated the term slumlord. But unfortunately, if we don't take care of our properties and maintain them properly, it's what we become. And that's not anything that I think anybody wants a title of. I think some of the simple things that I know that the ROA, you promote all the time,
the
is
RPOA
is to take care of your properties. You want to make sure that you're up to code and that you have your certificates from the city that says you're doing everything you're supposed to be. Nobody expects the Taj Mahal. I mean, rentals are what they are. But at the same time, the windows should work, the heater should work. There shouldn't be dripping water. Bed bugs should be addressed because it's still a growing problem in Grand Rapids. It's in every community. It's been a big thing, and they're difficult, from what I understand, to get rid of. But you can't ignore it. It has to be addressed. And I think that as landlords, if we're doing what we can do, then that's good. But if you're ignoring it, then that's where the issue comes in. And that's what I see tenants complain about more than anything else.
So, Brian, as we wrap it up here, why don't you just tell me a little bit more about your role at Precision Real Estate, what you're doing there, what the vision of the company is, and how you can help buyers and sellers?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, Precision Real Estate was started by Aaron Plooster around 2001. He had built a pretty good big business during a lot of the boom, and then as realtors started to fade away with the housing crisis we had, it kind of became a little bit smaller, and we're starting to build it back up again now as the market is just exploding. It's an amazing market right now to be in. So I am the office manager. I'm kind of your point of contact. We're looking to expand our business, including all the way to Florida. And that's actually where my broker is today. He's working on putting together an office there.
So you're seeing a continuation of the strong market that we've been in for the past couple of years?
Oh, yeah. And I think it's going to move in for the next 3 or 4 years as well. I mean, the average home right now is a 31-day turn between list to sell. The market prices are going above and beyond. I've had multiple homes listed with clients now that as we list them, there's offers that come in above asking, and anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 above asking. It is a crazy market right now. And the mortgages, I think, that are coming through are still at a nice, slow, steady rate that it's not going to stifle the market. There's still good room to buy. There's sellers out there, even though it's a limited inventory, there's still a lot of houses out there to buy. And you can find some pretty good deals as long as you look.
So if someone wanted to get a hold of you either as a buyer or seller or as a potential real estate agent who's interested in working with Precision, what's the best way to do that?
Well, of course, we have a Facebook page. You can come Precision LLC on Facebook, or you can reach out to me directly, Brian Durham, and it's 616-299-5777. Or you can catch me on my Gmail account, which is bdurham5@gmail.com.
And Durham is Durham?
Correct.
So B Durham.
Correct.
All right. Well, Brian, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today on the show. And it's been a real interesting getting kind of that telecommunications, legal, and real estate aspect of how our investments can intersect in those areas and make us more money. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And Icon Realty Group, helping home buyers, sellers, and investors in the West Michigan area. Find out more at theiconrealtygroup.com.
Have you ever owned or lived in a haunted house? Have you or your tenants ever encountered unexplained phenomena? If you have any real-life ghost stories, we'd love to hear them. The best will be compiled for a very special Halloween episode. Nothing is too scary or off limits. As long as it happened to you or someone you know, we want to hear about it. Email me at brian@higinvestor.com by Friday, October 6th to share your story.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.